This episode is sponsored by Cove Cleaning. Cove Cleaning is a full-service residential and commercial cleaning company that's been in business for almost 4 years now here in the state of Utah. Cove will be expanding to St. George in 2025 and neighboring states in the coming years as well. They offer recurring home cleaning service plans, window cleaning, and move-in and move-out cleanings. We've had Cove come to our house many times. They do a phenomenal job. My wife absolutely loves it when they come through. We've got 2 little kids and 2 dogs, so you can imagine how dirty our house gets from time to time. My favorite part when they come through, it just smells amazing after they're done. As well, we have a glass shower in our master bedroom, and when they come through, it just is sparkling. It's crystal clear by the time that they're done. I cannot recommend them enough. Anyone who mentions the Five Fists podcast on a quote form from their website or through an Instagram DM will receive 30% off any cleaning service with Cove. Contact them today through Instagram or check out their website, cove-cleaning.com. That's COVE-cleaning.com. Check them out today.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the show. If you're here listening, it's episode 7 now, I believe. Appreciate you all tuning in week to week. Been pretty cool. I've had quite a few people reach out to me and tell me how much they've enjoyed the different guests and stuff that we've had on the show. So I appreciate that. It goes a long way. Trying to do something like this, you just never know who might be listening and who isn't. So we appreciate the feedback and the support as always. As always, guys, you know, there's so much to get through every week, being in the midst of the beginning of the football season. So I will try and talk about what's important. I like to get off on my side tangents, but keep it as brief and concise today as we can. But there's a lot to talk about, a lot of highlights, a lot of headlines to get into. So let's do it. All right, guys, let's do this thing. As always, we're going to go through the games that happened this last week, and then we'll also talk a little bit about the games coming up this week, games that and bets, odds that I like coming up this week as well. I'm going to start it off a little bit differently this week, kind of go through some of the college games that took place. First and foremost, living in Utah, being a BYU fan, that game last week was so much fun to watch. I feel like it's been a while since they've had a game of that atmosphere, and Provo at night on a Saturday is so much fun, especially when you get a ranked team coming in. And I live about 5 minutes south of the stadium, or I guess north of the stadium. And it's fun. When I watch the games on Saturday nights, I leave my back door cracked a little bit. You can totally hear all the crowd noise. And so I could hear the crowd before plays would happen. And before that punt return happened, I literally felt like my house was shaking. It was pretty crazy. My parents were at that game, had some friends at that game, and all of them just said that it literally felt like the stadium was about to fall down. So it's fun to see them already overachieving this year, overachieving. I think before the season started, their win total was like 4.5, and they're already at 4. So their schedule gets tough coming up. They've got Baylor this week, then they've got Arizona at home, and then Oklahoma State at home. So those will both be really fun games. That Oklahoma State game is set to be played at 8:15 at night as well at LaVell Edwards Stadium. So once again, if the Cougs are undefeated going into that game, it's gonna be a fun atmosphere. I'm lucky enough to be able to go to that game, so I'm hoping that they are undefeated at that point. But anyway, I don't want to talk about that game or BYU for too long, or I'll start sounding like too much of a homer. But that game was so much fun to watch, and their defense looks legit, to say the least. So I'm cheering for them, hoping that they can keep it going moving forward. But right now, they need to ride that momentum and keep doing what they're doing. As far as some games to look forward to this week in college, the number one obviously is going to be that Bama and Georgia game. That'll be super fun on Saturday night. I think it's number one versus number 3 or 4. So that'll be a super fun game to tune into. And then as well, excuse me, as well, we've got Louisville versus Notre Dame, another ranked matchup there, which should be a good game. And as I was looking through these games, I was like, I stopped on that Texas game, obviously Texas is number 1. Georgia's number 2 now. So Georgia 2, Bama 4 playing each other this week, which will be super fun. But I was going through these games and I took a look at that Texas and Mississippi State game this week. And I can't remember the last time that Mississippi State was this much of an underdog. They are currently, I think, 38.5-point underdogs, which is just absurd. I could not tell you the last time that an SEC team outside of maybe Vanderbilt was that much of an underdog. So they are down bad this season. Hopefully they can figure some things out, but I think that Texas, quite honestly, could cover that spread crazy enough. But and then as well, I believe Illinois plays Penn State this week, which is another ranked matchup. And I think Penn State definitely wins that game, but I do think that Illinois is able to keep that game pretty close. I think the spread there is like 17 points, which is pretty crazy with a ranked matchup like that. So just some games to keep an eye on there. As far as the NFL goes, again, we'll kind of go through the games that took place last week. I'm not going to talk about every single one, but we'll talk about some of the bigger games, matchups that had a little bit more consequences than others. But as well, I'm watching the Giants Cowboys game while we're talking, so you get some live reactions to that as well as we go. Just to start off on that Thursday night game from last week, the Jets versus the Eagles. Jets 24, or not Eagles, sorry, Jets versus New England, the Patriots. Jets 24, Patriots 3. Aaron Rodgers looked like vintage Aaron Rodgers in that one, and Jets look legit after watching that game. I think that it's going to still take some time for them all to get kind of used to each other, and they'll drop some random games here and there, some trap games. But I think that the Jets, if they can figure things out, could be a sneaky playoff team. Just to touch on this game super quickly, the Jets and the Browns, I don't really know what to think of the Browns anymore these days. They're decent one week and then they're terrible the next. I think that that's one of those teams that I don't really know what to think about them. And moving forward, as long as they keep playing the way that they have, I don't think you can throw all the blame on Deshaun Watson. I really don't. I just don't think the Browns are a very good team this year, especially if they're dropping games to the Giants. Daniel Jones looked decent in that game, which is promising for the Giants, and hopefully he can keep that rolling. The Packers and the Titans, the Malik Willis revenge game there, he looked phenomenal. I think you watch this game and you realize that Matt LaFleur really is a top 5 coach in the NFL. If he can turn him from what he was in Tennessee to him playing as well as he has been in Green Bay, that's impressive to see, because watching him play the way he did in Tennessee just makes you think that he was the ultimate bust and that there was no shot of him ever being a contributor on a team. And they trade for him right before the season starts, and he gets a chance to jump in immediately and play very, very well. So that was pretty fun to see. I think that the Titans are kind of a dumpster fire this year, and as long as Will Levis keeps playing as reckless as he has been, then this is just going to kind of be the norm for the Titans, unfortunately. As well, we had the Bears and the Colts. I don't really have a ton on this other than the fact that the Bears have got to figure out their offensive line. Caleb played decent in this game. He had like 360-something yards, but they've got to figure that out. Their defense continues to play really well, but they have to figure out that offensive line to be able to run the ball and to pass protect, because right now, the way things are going, it is just not going to work. As well, I think that I was a little early on the Anthony Richardson take. He is not great. He can hit some deep balls, but other than that in between short to medium stuff is not his cup of tea, and he has not looked great so far. Moving on to the Texans and the Vikings game. Minnesota 34, Houston 7. I, again, have been very, very impressed with the Vikings, and I just think that the way that Sam Darnold has been playing in this offense is everything and more that you could have wished for as a Vikings fan, and it's been an awesome surprise, and they look like the best team in the NFC as things stand right now. And as long as Sam Darnold continues to stay healthy and just do what he needs to do and play inside the scheme of the offense, not try and do too much, then the Vikings are going to be a really tough team to beat, especially with the way that Brian Flores is calling his defense. Teams really just aren't able to do much against him right now. But the way that they shut down C.J. Stroud just leads me to believe that this is who they are. And these first 3 games have not been by accident. So the Vikings are a problem moving forward. And in my opinion, right now, as things stand, the best team in the NFC. But obviously, we will see what happens as the season goes on. The next game was the Eagles and the Saints in a really gross game, really low scoring. 15-12 was the final there. The Eagles hold it out on that last drive of the game, a deep shot to Dallas Goedert, takes it for like 61 yards, and they find a way to do it. The Saints offense did not look great in that game. They kind of had that come down to earth game for sure. And the Eagles find a way to pull it out. It didn't look great from either team there, but I think that the Saquon fit there in Philadelphia is perfect as you could have hoped it would be if you're an Eagles fan. It seems like a really, really great fit for both parties there. So if I'm an Eagles fan, I'm stoked about that, and that's promising signs moving forward. The next game was the Chargers in Pittsburgh versus the Steelers. The Steelers pulled that one out 20-10. A lot of injuries took place in this game for the Chargers. They lost Justin Herbert early in the third quarter. They also lost Joey Bosa, I think, in the first quarter. And then they lost both of their starting tackles in Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. And once that happened, the game just, it got out of hand. The Chargers defense couldn't get off the field. And then they went 3 and out every single drive in the second half. They ended up having 0 total yards of offense in the second half. Once Herbert got hurt, it just was downhill from there. And Taylor Heineke came in and gave his best effort, but at the end of the day, they could not block anyone, and he was fighting for his life back there. Justin Fields has looked really good over there in Pittsburgh, and it just goes to show how important coaching is in the NFL, and being able to transform the way that he has in such a short period of time, being in Pittsburgh with Mike Tomlin and those other coaches that are there, is very impressive, and honestly makes me super happy for Justin Fields, because coming out and getting drafted by the Bears is never a fun thing for quarterbacks. And so for him to kind of have this revival, so to speak, in Pittsburgh is fun to see. And he's not trying to be a superhero anymore. He's just doing his thing. And kind of like Sam Darnold, he's just playing inside the structure of the offense, and he is not trying to do too much. He only runs when he has to. He's not turning the football over. He's taking good care of it, and he's getting the ball out quick and just doing what he needs to do for them to win games. And the way that the Steelers do it, it's not pretty, but they find a way, and they're 3-0. So you got to start to wonder if it is a fluke or not. And at this point, if they continue to do this, they're going to win these games against teams that they match up well with. So, the Broncos at the Bucs. I could not have been more wrong about the outcome of this game. I thought that there was no chance the Broncos could win this one, and the Bucs just laid an absolute stinker in this game, and the Broncos came out hot. Bo Nix looked really good, and they find a way to win that one 26-7. Probably the most surprising score or outcome this week was the Panthers and the Raiders. Being a Raiders hater, I love to see this because Andy Dalton came in and balled out. And I talked about this last week when I had Luke and Wyatt on. They both were like, oh, Raiders, Raiders. And I was like, you know what? I just have this weird feeling that this is one of those games where Andy Dalton comes out and just catches fire in this first game and finds a way to get it done. And they more than did that. They dominated this game. The final was 36-22, and it wasn't even that close. I think that I'm pretty sure the Raiders scored in garbage time in that one, but that was like a 30-point game plus most of the game. So the Panthers looked really good. Andy Dalton looked phenomenal, and it makes you just wonder, was Bryce Young the problem? Because for him to come in and do this with the exact same weapons, the exact same offensive line, it just raises a lot of questions. And you got to wonder if they just got to trade Bryce Young and get what they can for him at this point, because he's just not a fit there right now. Moving on to the Dolphins and the Seahawks game. Without Tua, the Dolphins are cooked. Like, it's that simple. We'll see what Tyler Huntley can do this week, but without Tua, Tyreek and Jalen Waddle are just not what they need to be. They can't get the ball in their hands the way that they need to, and they're just a mess without him. So, again, praying that he can come back and that he's healthy when he does so. But right now, things are just not looking great there in Miami. Seahawks have found a way to win so far. They are 3-0, and they've done that the last two games, winning both of those games without Kenneth Walker, who's arguably one of the better offensive players on their team. So they found a way, and they lead the NFC West right now. So surprisingly enough. The next game, the Ravens at the Cowboys. The Ravens tried to lose this game. They tried to give it up to the Cowboys late in the fourth quarter, but they found a way to run the clock out and get a W. But if I'm a Ravens fan, I don't feel super great about that win just because of the way that it ended. And they're very lucky to be 1-2. They very easily could be 0-3. And so both those teams leave that 1-2 with a record of 1-2. And so we'll see if they can pick it up and start to win some games, because I think we all agree that they both are top of their respective conferences and teams that we expect to see in the playoffs and potentially make runs in the playoffs. So they're going to have to figure some things out there. Another really surprising outcome from this week, and just the way that it shook out, was the 49ers and the Rams. And Sean McVay just finds a way. And without their two best receiving weapons, they find a way to get it done, and Matt Stafford leads another game-winning drive. I saw this stat that was something crazy. Like, he's led like 45 game-winning drives in his career, which leads the entire NFL of active quarterbacks, which is insanely impressive. So they find a way to win, and the Niners just, their offense is not what it needs to be without Debo. He's such a key part of what they do. And I know that Brock still threw for like almost 300 yards. I think Juwan Jennings was balling out, but they need Debo back. They need CMC back, which, on that note, I saw something today that he's going to be out for another couple months. So they're going to have to figure something out there to get that offense going and find a way to win these games, because, they starting out 1-2. I don't think any Niners fans would have expected that to be the way that this season started. The last game on Sunday was the Chiefs and the Falcons. And yet again, late in the game in crunch time, there's a call that goes the Chiefs' way. And for any of those Chiefs fans that were saying the week before with the Bengals that it was pass interference late in the game, you got to keep that same energy with this call, because we all know that this was very similar, if not worse, of a penalty in the end zone against Kyle Pitts. No flag is thrown for some reason. The result of that play would have been the ball on the 1-yard line for the Falcons. Instead, I believe they ended up kicking a field goal. And it's just, it's getting out of hand. It's super blatant. It's really obvious that calls are going their way, and I don't think anyone can deny it at this point. And it's just insane to me. And then the very next night, and we can talk about this game now, is the Bengals and the Commanders. It's a very similar play. It's deeper down the field, more of like a jump ball type situation. But the flag gets thrown 10 times out of 10 when the defender doesn't turn his head on a play like that down the field. And it gets called in this game the very next day, and the Bengals get the ball at like the 3-yard line. And it just makes you wonder why calls go one way for one team and another way for another team. And it's very questionable. A lot of these things that have been happening and taking place, especially in crunch time, late in games. So long story short, the Chiefs do find a way to win that one. They're 3-0 some way, somehow. They have not even looked good doing it, but they're 3-0. And, that's that. And they very easily could be 1-2, 0-3, but they're the Chiefs and they figure out a way, one way or another. Touching on that Bengals Commanders game, I think that it was fun to see Jaden Daniels do what he's doing. Seeing a rookie quarterback perform well has been nice, because up till this point, that just has not been the case. And so for him to play as well as he did was fun to see, for sure. And he looks like the real deal out there. As far as the Bengals go, starting the season 0-3 in the division that they're in is just so far from ideal. And I see a ton of people kind of going to bat for Joe Burrow about how he plays well, but their defense is terrible and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, we got to keep the same standards for every team and every quarterback. And, Justin Herbert's been dealing with the same issue for forever, for his entire career, where he puts up these crazy numbers every single game, but they can't find a way to win because their defense gives up big plays and gives up leads and all of that. And so everyone wants to blame Justin Herbert when the Chargers are losing those games. And at some point, if that's what we're going to do for him, you got to do the same thing for Joe Burrow. He played well in that game. He played really well. Jamar Chase played really well. But the Bengals have got to figure some things out. And I think it really has obviously a lot more to do with their defense. But starting out 0-3, if you're a Bengals fan, similar to Niners fans starting 1-2, them starting 0-3 has got to be something that you never, ever, ever expected, especially with the opponents that they've had. Losing to the Patriots and then losing to the Commanders is just so far from ideal for them. The last game, an absolute just throttling of the Jaguars. The Bills win that game 47-10, and Josh Allen is officially the front runner in the MVP talks right now, just as I kind of expected in the preseason. That was my take for a minute. Well, that wraps up that week. This last week, obviously a lot of great games. I think that as a whole, this season's just been super weird, very unpredictable, and it's been really tough to know who the better team is in a lot of these games. And you leave those games thinking that one team is like on fire and they're going to carry it into the next week, and then that very following week, something crazy happens and they lose to a team that they should not lose to. And I believe so far in the first 3 weeks, the teams that have had that have been the biggest underdogs have won those games outright for the last 3 weeks, which is unheard of. So it's been very, very unpredictable up to this point. Going into this week, some games that I'll go through. I don't know if I'll go through every single one, but this Thursday night game we're watching right now, it's almost halftime. It's 14-6 Cowboys. And it's one of those games. I was texting some of my friends ahead of time and telling them I felt like it was one of those games that CeeDee Lamb's gonna go off. And up to this point, he honestly kind of has. Not sure his specific stats so far, but he's been playing very, very well in this game. They're just feeding him as they should. Their offense should absolutely run through him. And yeah, he's already got 5 receptions for 85 yards and a touchdown. And he had one kind of pitch outside run that he took as well for 10 yards. So he's getting force fed in this game so far. And Giants are doing the best they can to keep it close, but Cowboys are looking pretty good in that one. Moving forward to this week, a game that I want to touch on first and foremost is that Vikings-Packers game. Division matchup there will be super fun to see. I don't think they'll have Jordan Love back, and if they don't, I do think that the Vikings are the better team in this one. I know this game's being played in Green Bay, and so that actually puts the Vikings as an underdog, 3-point underdog. If they don't have Jordan Love, then I think that that's great value to take the Vikings in that spot. So that's actually going to be one of my locks of the week, is that I think that the Vikings can cover that 3-point spread in that one. Another divisional matchup, we've got the Saints and the Falcons. I think this is one of those games where you just kind of figure out what you're made of. You figure out what you're made of. And the Falcons, they're 1-2, but they have not looked bad up till this point. I think week 1, they didn't look great, but they've looked pretty good the last couple weeks, and beating the Eagles and then narrowly losing to the Chiefs. They are starting to figure things out. Kirk Cousins getting a little bit more comfortable figuring out who he can trust, who he can throw the ball to. So that'll be a fun game too. That the Falcons as well are favored in that game by 2.5 points because that's played in Atlanta. So that'll be a fun game too to watch. See if the Saints are frauds or not in that one. Another fun game. We got the Andy Dalton revenge game here with the Panthers versus the Bengals. And I just think it would be incredible entertainment to see him beat the Bengals and put them at 0-4, the team that he was drafted by, a team that he played for a very long time. If he could beat them in that spot, that would be just so much fun to see. It's not that I don't like the Bengals, but that would be super, super awesome to see if he could pull that off there. And we'll see if the Bengals are just cooked this year. I don't know. So far, they've looked like they are. Another divisional one here with the Jags and the Texans. The Jags, one of those teams too that if we can just pause for a second, take a step back. I mentioned this a few weeks ago, but I think that the Jaguars and specifically Trevor Lawrence are insanely overrated, and they are getting absolutely exposed so far this season. And they just look terrible. And so they're 0-3 going to Houston this week. Houston's a 6-point favorite. If Trevor Lawrence has any pride, he's gonna find a way to win this game. And I know it's a team game, but he's got to have a good performance because he has not for quite some time now. But that will be a fun game to see there. I don't see how the Jaguars beat the Texans, but we'll just have to see what happens in that one. Will be a fun game to watch. Another game here, battle of 1 and 2 teams. We've got the Rams at the Bears. I think that just considering the struggles of both of these teams, it's been offensive line play. And so this is going to come down to which defense can get more pressure on the quarterback. And this game's a toss-up for me. I don't really know who I think is going to win this game, but I'm tempted to take that 3 points with the Rams being an underdog against the Bears, which I get that it's in Chicago, but that line does not make a ton of sense to me, if I'm being totally honest. But one of those games that we'll see if the Rams just have the Niners number and they found a way last week, or if they actually can be a serviceable team without some of their biggest playmakers. Another game I want to talk about here is the Chiefs and the Chargers. This is going to be another lock of the week for me, and it's probably going to be opposite of what you guys are thinking. But the Chargers will probably be without both of their starting tackles. They will be without Derwin James as well, which something that I want to talk about for a second. He has had repeated offenses or whatever you want to call it of the, blows to the head or neck area. And they've warned him He's gotten a ton of personal fouls on that and unnecessary roughness calls, all that stuff. But the call that they had against the Steelers this last week was just ridiculous. It's a play that happens fast. He's just trying to make a tackle. His helmet hits his shoulder first and then kind of bounces up towards the head area. And they throw a flag on it. It's 15 yards. He gets the penalty. And then they go so far to suspend him for this game, which, if you watch these games from this last week, that play, that hit, that, quote unquote shot to the head should have been the least of the NFL's worries. I don't know if any of you watched the Saints and the Eagles game, but the two hits that took place on the same play that caused Devontae Smith to get a concussion were both, number one, in my opinion, both those players should have been ejected. Two, there was no flag thrown on either of them. And then three, no suspension, and to my knowledge, no fine or anything going into it. And if any of you weren't able to see that play, Devontae Smith he stood up by like three different defenders, and his momentum is moving back towards the line of scrimmage. And Saints defensive lineman comes from the other side of the field and just lays him out completely. He's unconscious. His helmet flies off, and he's got his arms like all stiff. And then as well, another defensive lineman comes in really late and throws his head in towards Devontae Smith without his helmet on. And so if we really want to talk about player safety, like, that's where that conversation should be. Not that, it's okay that Derwin James has had many of these hits, but if you just look at the overall, product that we're seeing right now, like, that hit from Derwin James should be the least of their worries, considering these other things that are happening and nothing's being said about it. Makes zero sense to me. So they'll be without him. This game is a 7-point spread in favor of the Chiefs. It's going to be played in LA. And this is way more of a Chiefs lock, in my opinion, than it is me being biased towards the Chargers. But the Chiefs just let games be close late in the game. And I believe Justin Herbert's going to find a way to play. And if he does, then I think that they absolutely can cover that 7 points. I don't think the Chargers can win this game, and I don't think that they will. But I do think that they can cover that 7 points by all means against the Chiefs. They usually do. These games are always tight. These division games are always, smack you in the mouth, and you got to find a way to win late in the game. I think it's going to be very similar this week. Another fun game this week, which, who knows, this could be a matchup later down the road in the playoffs, but we've got the Bills in Baltimore versus the Ravens. This is also one of those games that the Ravens, unless they want to dig themselves into a really deep hole and drop even further back from the Steelers in their division, they've got to find a way to pull this game out and beat the Bills. It's a tough task. The Bills look really, really good, and Josh Allen is playing the best football he's ever played and the safest football he's ever played. So the Ravens got to find a way to win that game. I do think that the Bills are the better team. They somehow are the underdog, though, probably only because it's being played in Baltimore. But I think the Ravens have got to figure it out and find a way to get to 500. There's 2 Monday night games this week. One of them is just an absolute snooze fest stinker of a game. Could be entertaining due to terrible offensive football, but we've got the Titans versus the Dolphins. Man, I don't know in that one. I think that both teams are just scratching and clawing for anything at this point, and it's a 1-point spread being played in Miami. I don't know. This game's going to be super gross in my opinion, and the total in that one's 36.5, and honestly, I could see that game still finding a way to stay under that point total there. Kind of a heavyweight matchup in the NFC to finish off this next week is going to be the Seahawks and the Lions. And that's going to be played in Detroit. And I think this is the part of the season where Detroit's going to start to figure things out. I think they knocked the Seahawks off this week. and they find a way to get to 3-1 and show that they are kind of there to stay in the NFC. So lots of good games this week. It'll be fun to see who kind of starts to separate themselves from the pack in that instance. And I'm really excited to sit on the couch and watch a lot of football this coming Sunday. It'll be fun. I appreciate you guys tuning in, as always. That was a quick show today, but just wanted to fly through these games, give you my take on these games and the ones that I'm really looking forward to this coming week. So keep tuning in, keep sharing the show with your friends on your stories. Please subscribe if you haven't, and turn on notifications and stuff on the socials so that you guys can stay up to date on everything that we're putting out. But appreciate you guys tuning in. We will be right back here next week. Love you guys. Good night, Jack.